Someone once asked Albert Einstein, if you had 1 hour to save the world from this extraordinary catastrophe, what would you do? He said, I would spend 55 minutes trying to understand the problem, and then 5 minutes to work out the solution. If we understand the problem, we can prevent it. In the early 90s, the first piece that we funded by external scientists came back and examined the question, does having a gun in the home protect you? Because the N.R.A. and the gun manufacturers had been advertising and trying to promote gun sales, telling people that if you care about your family, you need to have a gun.
Honest people use a gun in this country to defend themselves from criminals.
So we looked at this question. Having a gun in your home not only doesn't protect you, but it puts your family at risk. Not a little risk. The risk was 200% greater that someone in your family would be shot and killed with a gun. And the risk that someone in your home would commit suicide with a gun was 5 times greater, a 400% increase in risk. And the N.R.A. didn't think that that would be good for business. And this really spurred them on to attack us with much greater fury. And they went to Congress and they said, you have got to stop this research because it's going to result in all Americans losing the right to have a gun in their home. And the battle really came to a head in 1996 at a congressional hearing. And this is where I met J. Dickey.
What's that still make noise where they said you're gonna laugh and you're gonna cry at the same time, and that's what I've done. And I want to thank you, some of you all, for what you've said tonight.
He was called the N.R.A.'s point man as far as making sure that there was no funding to the C.D.C. for gun violence research. Whatever cause he undertook, he generally felt strongly about it.
We're doing this through education and training and not through a discredited study program by the C.D.C.
I went up to this congressional hearing, and it was really an ambush.
Dr. Rosenberg, we'll begin with you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Mark Rosenberg.
J. Dickey had all of these questions, some of them based on false premises. He said, isn't it true that you really want to get rid of all guns? And I felt, how dare him? This guy is really bad. Worse than not understanding, he doesn't care. J. Dickey and I, at that point, were really kind of mortal enemies.
This is an issue of federally funded political advocacy. We have here an attempt by the C.D.C. to raise emotional sympathy for those people who are for gun control. It is a blatant attempt on the part of government to federally fund lobbying and political activism.
And what the Dickey Amendment said was that none of the funds that go to C.D.C.'s Injury Center shall be used to promote or advocate gun control. We were never doing lobbying for gun control. It didn't say anything about not being allowed to do research. What it meant to people was, if you do research in this area, we will harass you. So this threat of congressional inquiries, it can wreak havoc with your research. And that hearing was so bad that when I got back to C.D.C., my handlers said, Rosenberg, don't you ever go talk to that guy, J. Dickey. If you talk to him, it'll be like throwing a match on gasoline. A few weeks later, after the hearing, C.D.C. got a call from Jay's legislative assistant who wanted to go over some of the data that we had presented. I met with the assistant, and on the way out, he said, "Oh, by the way, the congressman is in his office, and he'd like to say hello." And I basically said, "Oh, either I don't go and offend him by refusing to say hello, and I make things worse that way, or I go and I talk to him and I violate what my bosses at C.D.C. said." I walked into his office, and I see that on his wall, he has pictures of his children. And I asked him about his children, and he asked me about my children. The next thing I knew, he had invited my son and his whole class to come visit him in Congress. We started talking, and we actually started to trust each other, and we started to like each other. And over the years, that developed into an incredible friendship. When he met someone who had views very different from his own, he wanted to talk to that person more, to find out why there were such big differences. If you can put some of your preconceived bias, if you can put that aside and recognize the values that the other person has, you may understand that you share a lot more than differ.
Centers for Disease Control. The words are not real long, only a couple of syllables. Look up the word disease in the dictionary. There is no reference in any dictionary that I can find that says that accidents or handgun injuries or murders are a disease.
That N.R.A. strategy of hyperpolarizing the people worked out well for them, but it had devastating consequences in terms of continuing gun deaths.
Columbine High School, now the site of the deadliest high school attack in U.S. history.
A day trader went on a shooting rampage.
Opening fire on immigrants.
Deadliest campus shooting in U.S.
Chaotic.
history.
Kids are shaking, they're crying, they're screaming.
17 people were
10
killed.
people died.
Shot in the back.
Shooting death of 7-year-old Jasmine.
The family's traumatized by this event.
Worst mass killing in Georgia history.
This is Littleton, Colorado.
Binghamton will never be the same. The Red Lake shooting was quickly forgotten by many, and they hope legislators will hear the students speaking out now.
There was a big shooting in Aurora, Colorado. Barack Obama came out and said this shooting was crazy.
We may never understand what leads anybody to terrorize their fellow human beings like this.
Jay and I both felt the shooting wasn't crazy. The shooting was predictable. If you let someone who's burdened with severe paranoid schizophrenia acquire an arsenal of ammunition, then this is going to happen. And we decided that science had so much to bring to bear on this issue. So Jay and I wrote an op-ed together, saying just that. And Jay said, we need to bring the scientific research back to the problem of gun violence.
What changed? How did you have the change of heart?
Well, I just think it's just the weight of all of the incidents that have occurred, and that is that the kids and the innocent people who are being killed deserve our attention.
You're the guy. It's your bill.
I feel different now than I did before. Science has answers, and research is the way to free it.
He was difficult to get to change his mind about anything once he had set the course. So I think it was remarkable for him to say, I've rethought this.
I just figured that maybe I could do it, I could bring some attention to it, and then step out of the way and let them do the work.
Jay died suddenly. His family asked me, would I give the eulogy? Jay was the only person I ever ended conversations with this. He'd say, goodbye, Mark. I'd say, bye, Jay. And he'd say, I love you. And I would say, I love you. And we meant it. We really meant it. And I think we felt that this journey we'd been on, where you start at polar opposites, angry and furious at each other, that journey where we came to see each other, understand each other, trust each other, learn from each other, love from each other, that was an incredible journey. It really was a love story. Underneath what people think are such opposed forces are some very important shared values. No one at that N.R.A. convention, no one wants their children to be killed at school. No one at the March for Our Lives wants their children to be killed at school. That is such a strong, common, shared value, and they don't see it. We've become so polarized.
The status quo is not acceptable. We still need to do research. That's where my regret is. All this time that we have had, we would have found a solution, in my opinion. And I think it's a shame that we haven't.